Hi everyone, I'm Valentina Rossi, Marketing Specialist at Zappi Group. I would like to welcome you to this session. Please remember that this meeting is also being recorded and it will be available to watch on demand following this session. If you have any questions during the live, please add them to the Q&A. You can find it to the right of your screen. Note that your question will be sent privately. With that, I would like to introduce our speaker. Welcome to Stephen Borchuk and Emma Owens from Assent, who will be speaking about sustainability trends in the European Union and the driving force to take action. Enjoy!
Thanks, Valentina. Perfect. We'll give everyone just a beat or two, as I see a lot of people are filtering in. And as we go through, like we mentioned, the recording will be shared and you'll have the collateral as well. So we'll do some introductions while people are signing in. So my name is Stephen Borchuk. I'm a Southern European director here at Assent. I actually started my career at our global headquarters based in Ottawa, Canada, looking to share some insights and best practices over my last 6 years in industry. And along with me today is my colleague, Emma. So I'll let her introduce herself.
Yes, hello everybody. Thank you for having us. My name is Emma Owens and I am part of the regulatory and sustainability expert team at Assent, and I focus on product sustainability. I'm originally from Sweden, but I am now based in the UK.
Perfect. So to give everyone a little bit of a taste of what we're going to go through today, we're really going to break the agenda down into two main sections. So one is giving a quick introduction into who you're talking to, who you're hearing from. And then we'll go into sustainability trends in the EU for 2024 and beyond, and really tying that into the driving forces to take action and address your market risks, both in Europe and in North America. And then we're going to give you some practical guidance and best practices that we've gained on how to build a sustainable supply chain program. So a little bit about Assent. We're an organization who was originally founded in Canada, who opened in 2010. So we've been around for 14 years. We have over 750 happy customers globally, where Zappi is, we're proud to say, one of those. We work solely with durable goods manufacturing. So from an Assent perspective, our bread and butter is the 5 key verticals, kind of aerospace and defense, automotive, electronics, industrial equipment, and medical devices. So generally complex products that have longer life cycles, which means that by the time you've designed your product, all of the regulatory landscape has probably changed 3 or 4 times before it went on the market, and it's going to change 10 or more times before it ends its useful life. So it's a very complex topic. We have over 950 employees globally in our global headquarters in Canada, our European headquarters in the Netherlands. We have offices in Africa and the Asia Pacific to ensure we can meet our customers' supply chains where they are. And we're very proud to say that we're a certified B Corporation. To give a bit of background into Assent, Assent at our core is a SaaS platform that allows customers to centralize their data and engage their value chains on a wide range of topics, whether that's environmental, social governance, ESG/sustainability, product and material compliance, things like REACH, ROS, SKIP, and PFAS, or trade compliance, country of origin, and preferred agreements. We try to blend software, services, and consulting into one holistic platform and partnership to ensure that we can help advise our customers and make sure that we're giving them the highest quality data from their supply chain. A quick snapshot of some organizations we work with. We're very proud to work with 75% of the Fortune 500, but we have a wide range of customers from some of the biggest names in the world down to small mom and pop shops who are really struggling just to keep up with the requirements around the globe. So really happy to provide context, some more information after the session. But that's enough about us for now. We want to get into some value for yourselves. So I'm going to hand over to my colleague, Emma, who's going to dive a little bit deeper into the trends in the EU and how that's driving business today.
Right. Thank you so much, Stephen. Yes, let's dive into the trends that we are seeing. You can jump straight ahead to the next slide. So there's a lot going on in the world and there is much uncertainty. There is an ecological crisis with climate change, toxification, species loss, There's an economical crisis with aging population, starvation, migration, and also, of course, the geostrategical situation with wars, unrest, and close to conflict. And at the core of this, we do find resource availability as well. So we're seeing this shift in mindset towards a decrease in resource consumption, more nearshoring and safeguarding access to critical materials. And this shift in mindset requires a more holistic approach to sustainability. Next slide, please. So this leads to more and more recalibration of the globalization. And one place where we can have a peek at a measure of this is in the notification submitted to the World Trade Organization regarding technical barriers to trade. So these are generally a good indication of how many new standards and regulations are introduced. And as we can see, there has been an increase in notification. And in fact, in 2023, that was the year with the highest number of notifications on record, with, I believe it was 4,079 notifications at the end of the year. 454 of those notifications came from the United States, and this was the country with the most notifications. This was followed by the East African Federation, so Burundi, the DRC, Kenya, Rwanda, South Sudan, Tanzania, and Uganda, with 412 notifications, so not too far behind. And then at a distance, Brazil with 153 notifications. And the US was not only on top in 2023. Please go back, Stephen.
Sorry, too fast.
Yeah. The US was not only on top in 2023. It's actually been in the top 10 for 27 of the 29 years of notification. So in those 29 years, since 1995, the top 5 countries submitting notifications totally has been the US, followed by Uganda, Brazil, the European Union, and Kenya. So even if the US is generally in the top, legislation really is emerging globally, and we do see evidence of this. And this is not a cumulative chart. These are new notifications each year. And this increase is really driven by emerging markets growing their own regulatory infrastructure, like those East African Federation countries, for example. We see new technologies that are driving new standards and regulations, and then smaller jurisdictions as well, releasing their own regulations, such as the different state level regulations that we see in the US, for example, and also geopolitics, of course. Now we can go ahead to the next one. So when we look at the world from a regulatory perspective, specifically concerning product compliance and ESG topics, we see this harmonization and convergence. And while years ago, detoxification was very remote from energy consumption, remote from safety, remote from corporate sustainability, these days, regulatory requirements on the product level lead to big data. And big data governs initiatives such as the EU Digital Twin, which in turn will be expressed as the Digital Product Passport, for example. And that Digital Product Passport itself contains artifacts from all over the place and will become subject to standardized EU-based data exchange infrastructures as well. But ESG and robust sustainability practices are becoming a requirement for market access rather than a nice to have. And then on the other hand, product compliance is introducing traditionally ESG topics, such as carbon footprinting, for example, at the product level. And this will then feed into that digital twin or digital product passport that I will talk about on the next slide, please, Steve. So while all of these topics have existed fairly independently of each other, with some overlap here and there, of course, we are seeing that these silos are being broken down and a holistic approach is being taken through the convergence of ESG and product compliance. So for the DPP, we will have both centrally and decentrally stored data. The centrally stored data will be available online in a DPP registry with data carriers, unique product identifiers, whereas the decentrally stored data will be made available by manufacturers on their own websites. For example, of specific interest, we have the ICSMS. That is the Information and Communication System for Market Surveillance, and that's a mouthful, but it's an encompassing platform for market surveillance, We also have the EU forced labour ban database for central registry of incidents and target regions, and also SKIP, of course. And these are just some examples of the systems that we can expect will be interconnected to really allow this holistic view of a product. And this is only really possible because of the EU's policies in the digital realm, which ultimately lead to this digital twin, a full representation of products in the EU data sphere. Next slide, please. So if we just take a look at a couple of examples of ESG being introduced at the product level. First off, we have the CBAM, or the Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism. And this is a regulatory measure which imposes a carbon tax on imported goods in the EU with the purpose of fighting carbon leakage. So it's trying to mitigate the risk that carbon costs could lead EU businesses to move their operations to countries with less stringent carbon pricing mechanisms. And it equalizes that carbon price paid by EU and non-EU producers by ensuring that imported goods are subject to a carbon price equivalent to that carbon price of production in the EU. And it introduces new reporting requirements for EU importers of certain goods whose production is carbon intensive and at most significant risk of carbon leakage. So we're talking cement, iron and steel, aluminium, fertilizers, electricity, hydrogen. And there is a transitional phase that started in October 2023 and will be fully implemented by January 2026. And the scope is also expected to be expanded by 2030 to a broader range of goods. Another good example of a new regulatory measure that introduces typical ESG topics at the product level is the EU batteries regulation that was adopted in July of last year. This one aims to improve the sustainability of batteries and reduce their environmental footprint, as well as the dependence on third countries for critical raw materials such as lithium, for example, by increasing the uptake of recycled materials. And it also aims to reduce the negative social and environmental impacts of mining, for example, for those raw materials. Cobalt is an example there. And also to improve the access of this sustainability information to really allow consumers to make informed buying decisions through the introduction of the digital batteries passport, I should say. Okay, so next slide, please, Stephen. If those are the trends we are seeing, just to summarize, so we're seeing a clear convergence between traditional ESG and product compliance to form this holistic and complex sustainability requirements with transparency, really, through digitalization. So then we ask, what are the drivers behind this market access risk that we are seeing? And I will be using PFAS as an example to demonstrate the why you need to be addressing these. So first of all, the real driver is the fact that lawmaking is very different now. In the EU, they have what is called framework legislation. So this acts as a backbone. It provides a structure, and on that, we hang the different delegated acts. And in those delegated acts, we get the technical measures. And this means that not every legislation has to be written from scratch, or if you will, be covering every technical aspect by the time it's published. This speeds up the process of introducing new legislation, and it also results in more of a phased-in approach. But this can be really, really tricky for companies to adapt to this new pace of introducing all this new legislation, not just keeping up with the number of new requirements that are coming your way. I mean, it's not a one-person job just to keep track of it, but it becomes increasingly difficult when you also have to reach into your supply chain to gather information to meet requirements, or collaborate on collective actions to get on track, or even engaging your entire value chain, because these things can take time. And a recent example of this is the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, or CSRD. This was adopted in December 2022, and only 6 months later, we saw the introduction of the European Sustainability Reporting Standards, the ESRS. And these are sector agnostic at this point, but they are working on introducing sector-specific standards very soon in legislative terms. And this is a lot of change in a very short period of time. Next slide, please. Thank you. So to illustrate this concept, we have this pyramid. So at the very bottom, we have the foundation, which is, in this case, the very broad EU Green Deal and the Circular Economy Action Plan. And this serves as the basis for all legislation that does or will contribute to EU's climate goal, detoxification, etc. In the next tier up, we have, for example, the ESPR, the Eco Design for Sustainable Products Regulation that we're expecting to be published this year. And this is where the requirements for the digital product passport will live. And it is a framework regulation that ensures that products are sustainable by design. And on that framework, we go to the next level. So we see the different European Commission delegated acts that will provide the technical details on carbon footprint, substances of concern, reusability, the list goes on. And these requirements for market access will be set out in the delegated acts based on the different product groups that have similar functions. Right, next slide, please. So I said I was going to use PFAS as an example to really bring to your attention both the regulatory and the non-regulatory drivers for taking action. And hopefully you've all heard about PFAS at this point. I'm sure you recognize at least some trade names on this screen. These substances have very strong carbon-fluorine bonds that don't break down, which is why they're also called forever chemicals. And this is also the reason that they have very desirable performance attributes. They are used extensively because of this, and legislators globally are taking action. In the EU, for example, there is a proposal to restrict 12,000 PFAS substances under REACH Annex 17. Now, this is expected to be delayed slightly because they received an unprecedented amount of comments. I think it was over 5,600 in the consultation period, and that will take some time to go through. But PFAS is also a topic in other parts of the world. Legislators in the US is ahead of Europe on this, and there will be a major impact on industry in terms of product sustainability due to, among other things, obsolescence, parts obsolescence. And the financial impact that this can have is major. So sustainability now has to be considered from an economic perspective as well. So next slide, please. We have an example in the US. Aside from all the state level legislation we're seeing, last I checked, actually 46 states have passed or proposed PFAS legislation. But this example is on the federal level, where the EPA has released its PFAS reporting requirements. And the key for you here is that it includes any manufactured or imported PFAS in the US, including PFAS in articles. Distributors, contract manufacturers are also included in the scope. And another aspect to this reporting rule is that the substances in scope are based on the chemical structure of the substance rather than a specified exhaustive list. So you need to act yesterday, ideally, to have the time to gain a deep understanding of exactly what substances are used where in your products and if they fit into that definition. Reporting is also retrospective, so they want you to report any PFAS on their own, in mixtures or in products as far back as 2011 by May next year. Next slide, please. You may say, that's impossible, but they have also included an explicit requirement for you to try. So you must make reasonable inquiries, and that includes, reaching into your supply chain to gather this information. And if after reasonable inquiry, you can't reasonably make estimates for certain data elements, you can indicate this in your reporting. But the key thing here is that you need to be documenting your activities so that you can provide this evidence of due diligence. But there's also another driver, like I hinted to at the start of this PFAS example, that is also relevant to many other regulations and topics. And that is, if you want to go to the next slide, the non-regulatory drivers, of course. So first off, we have NGOs and your customers. Consumers want PFAS-free products. Their widespread use and effects have really saturated the mainstream media lately, which has also been helped by NGOs who are pushing for restrictions. Next, we have your competitors. We are seeing more and more companies publishing their plans for PFAS elimination, really raising the expectations here. Another couple of things to consider are pressure from investors and insurers. We're seeing investment firms who are demanding to see plans for the phase out of PFAS, and insurers that refuse or charge a really high premium if PFAS are not discontinued. And then, of course, your suppliers. Chemical manufacturers are discontinuing PFAS, for example, due to high litigation costs. And my last slide, Stephen, if you will, regulations really don't matter if you can't get the parts. So this poses a massive risk for obsolescence. 3M has announced that they are discontinuing all PFAS manufactured by 2025. That includes over 25,000 products, last I checked. And this can lead to unsustainable business situations, stockpiling, hurried purchases, scarce supply chains for replacement technologies. And this isn't just related to the products themselves, but also in your maintenance, repair, and operations equipment. So, Stephen, how can companies build a supply chain sustainability program that really mitigates these risks and moves them into a proactive position?
Well, that's a great question, Emma. And I think just before we jump into this, I did see a question come in from an Eli saying, hey, Emma, can you explain the notifications you referred to at the beginning, e.g. the US files more notifications than other countries? What does that mean? They send much more deviations or more requirements. Can we maybe just touch on that before I jump into how to protect ourselves here?
Sure. So in the example of the US, a lot of the state level legislations are coming out, and we're really seeing when the US is making notifications, it could be from any state, but it's measured at the US level. So really it is a case of all the different states making all these legislations, and organizations seeing these as technical barriers to trade, that they need to comply with these legislations and standards that are upcoming.
Okay, perfect. And we got all that information. The link to the reference document is in the presentation as well. So it's on the World Trade Organization website as well. So you can go through and look in a little more detail. So that's one area of the world is getting more complicated, a little more challenging, and similar to what's happening a little bit in Europe, with member states going faster than maybe the larger European Union. Similar things are happening in North America as well. So how can an organization protect themselves? How can you build supply chain sustainability and try to make sure that you have a level of protection? So what we always recommend is that you start with a risk analysis and build from there. Ultimately, you're in business to deliver products, goods, or services to your markets. And without being able to deliver those, you can't fund initiatives to make sure you're sustainable, you're being compliant, and you're following the laws. So you need to understand where your risks lie. So when you're conducting these risk analysis, it really helps you detect your risk, mitigate your overall risk as an organization, and then preempt potential risks by working with industry organizations, partners, consultants to understand what's coming down the pipe and what others are doing in industry. We strongly recommend that directly engaging your supply chain is essential. You can't really have an understanding of your risk unless you understand what's happening outside of the four walls of your business. So there are, in a number of studies, anywhere between 80 to 90% of your material risk is going to sit in your supply chain or in your value chain, which means you may have all the best policies and procedures in place internally, but if you don't understand what's happening and the actors providing you key components and initiatives in order to build your products or deliver to your customers, you're not really mitigating or understanding the risk of operating. I like to always use the example of Apple. Apple doesn't really make anything themselves. They design a lot of products, and then they use Foxconn and other contract manufacturers to source their supply chains, deliver those products. So although they control the design, a lot of obligations, it's Apple who ends up in the news if anything goes wrong. So if an upstream supplier has an issue, a human rights violation, a non-compliance risk, the media doesn't really want to take that small, no-named vendor and put them on blast. They want to go as big and wide as possible. So engaging and having strong relationships with your supply chain and value chain is essential. And we really think that leveraging technology and automation is the only way that you're going to be able to do this at scale. So sustainable supply chain management really is going to need you to go beyond your direct suppliers, which means that you're going to need to make use of indirect engagements and enhanced supplier screening methods, such as adverse media monitoring and geo-risk assessments, to really give you a holistic picture of your baseline risk so that you can make the correct business decisions. So when you go to then implement or mitigate some of these risks and build your programs out, Assent recommends that you follow industry standard surveys or examples or best practices. There's two reasons for this. One is, generally speaking, industry standards like OECD, GRI, IEC are going to be understood in the eyes of governments, regulators, and customers as industry best practice. So if you're following these, you have a defensible level of due diligence. And that's going to give you some level of protection that you're following the best practice in industry. The second and sometimes more critical benefit is that by following industry standards and aligning to those standards when you're engaging your supply chain or value chain, is you're going to be speaking the same language all of those suppliers, other customers are speaking, which is going to reduce the burden for those suppliers. So if you're asking for information in a format that they're familiar with, they're providing to other customers, they're providing to other entities, and they have to comply with themselves, the odds of them having that information, understanding the requirement, and being able to provide that data in a timely manner goes way up. Whereas if you create your own declarable or restricted substance list that is agnostic of industry, no one else is using it, the burden for the supply chain is significantly higher, adoption is going to be lower, and your kind of belief in that quality of data may be lower. And what we're really trying to get you is the most robust data possible. So the more robust your data, the more sustainable your program can be, the more mature and the more deep decisions you can make based off that information. And then ultimately you want to be able to fill that information into your internal processes that currently exist today. A lot of the organizations we work with have very robust quality processes for suppliers. There may be other audit schedules, other assessments or procurement tools like preferred supplier programs, kind of checks and balances, carrots and sticks, if you will. And you want to make sure that you're building your sustainability initiatives into that existing framework to make sure, one, that your internal stakeholders are adopting and leveraging the data that you're working so hard to manage. But two, again, it's easier for your suppliers to interact in that cadence that they're familiar with. So determining those impacts and risks in the supply chain can be really, really overwhelming because, as Emma just mentioned, there was 4,000 new notifications this year, 3,700 last year. So not all of those are going to need the same level of prioritization for your business. And not all of them are going to give the same level of risk based off your industries, where you operate, and your demands. So understanding your risk is going to help you prioritize these initiatives. And the more you engage with your supply chain, the better you're going to understand these topic sets, because really, this is a marathon. You're not going to be able to turn it on day one and say, perfect, I'm the most sustainable business in the world. Or, boom, I checked the box, I bought Assent, I am now 100% compliant. I wish it would go that way. I would sell a whole lot more. We would be a lot bigger of an organization. But ultimately, we realize this is a marathon of getting you from where you are to where you need to be in the future. And what the regulators want to see, and what your customers generally want to see, is that you're undertaking that kind of best practice defensible program where you're continually striving for improvement. You're always trying to become the best actor you can. And what's really going to be required to do that is making sure you have supplier development. These requirements are as new for your suppliers as they are for you. So you need to make sure you're providing them a framework to be educated and to be supported and to give you questions and feedback in a way that can be very monitored, and that you can provide expertise, guidance, and leverage to bring about change in your supply chain. Because in some instances, like the German Supply Chain Due Diligence Act, if you find a bad actor, you're not supposed to remove that actor from your supply chain. You're supposed to work with them to bring them up to the level of standard that you want to see. So really, it's about leveraging those relationships, mitigating your future risk. And ultimately, you need senior management support and buy-in. And that's how you're going to really get these programs off the ground, because you may need to walk away from some suppliers, or you may need to pay a little more to have these suppliers undertake some of these initiatives, or you may need to invest in your internal teams to have more robust tools and policies. So one tool that we like to give to the market is kind of a very high level maturity model for, again, complex durable goods manufacturers. We'll post the links in the chat, and they'll be in the presentation that you can undertake that kind of just help you get a little visibility into how your organization sets up today when it comes to kind of sustainability and compliance, and understanding your level of maturity, which can in turn potentially give you your level of risk. So we start from kind of that, hey, I just need to make a plan, to basic compliance, to foundational sustainability, where your programs are now partially defensible. You have some risk awareness and mitigation in place. You're looking at operational efficiency. Some business units, some sites are operating more robustly than others. You're comparing and contrasting. And then you're really trying to leverage that foundation to go deeper, to ultimately get to a more sustainable, net zero, proactive risk management approach, where ultimately your reputation and your sustainability initiatives will give you more brand power, which will increase your pricing power and ultimately have you viewed potentially as an industry leader. But again, not every organization strives for that. That's not always a realistic place to be. So it's all about understanding where you sit today and working towards strong to deep sustainability in the near future as the requirements continue to emerge. So when we look at solutions specifically designed for complex manufacturers, when we read a lot of regulations, when you read about LCA, product carbon footprint, it sounds great on paper, right? If I'm selling a cable that has very, very shallow supply chain, I can probably get raw material data, understand where that information is coming from. Where if I'm making a Boeing 747, to use an example from the news today, with thousands of components, thousands of suppliers, and you're so far away from the raw material manufacturers, how are you going to get there in a reasonable time frame? So you want to make sure that you are trying to, again, drive and design your programs in a cyclical manner that's going to allow you to understand what's material today, what topic areas can you prioritize, who are we then going to directly engage to collect and manage information that we can review and analyze to build our reports, and then ultimately improve on year over year. So you need to build cyclical processes in order to make sure that this is an endless loop of continuous improvement. And when we're talking about your value chain and your supply chains, we're really seeing this as a three-pronged approach. And this is where Assent can really uniquely position with our software, our managed service teams, and our regulatory expertise, like Emma, is we provide a tool that not only provides that direct and indirect monitoring of the suppliers, but we give you guidance and expertise on how to set up these programs, how to materially scope your requirements, and how to improve and provide corrective actions based off the industries you and your supply chain or value chain are in. Really, we want to take a 360-degree approach, because at scale, depending on your organization, you're not going to treat every entity in your value chain or your supply chain the same. They don't have the same level of risk. They don't require the same level of engagement or spend to manage. So we want to make sure that you always have a holistic view. So here at Assent, we offer a two-pronged approach where we pair direct engagement, which is kind of think of your standardized and configurable ESG data collection surveys. So going directly out to that entity and asking them questions and getting raw data back, direct source data back from those entities that you can report and manage on. But we all know suppliers, entities that we're working with, maybe like to fudge the truth, maybe want to paper over some things. If you ask a direct question, do you have any child labor? I don't think anyone is going to say yes to that question. So you have to be smart in the way that you ask those questions. But you also need to show due diligence that you're not always taking everything at face value. And this is where enhanced supplier screening really comes in, and indirectly monitoring those entities, both in the media behind paywalls and public screening, to see if there's anything coming up that maybe should raise an eyebrow, make you do a little more due diligence, dive a little deeper. With that direct engagement and making sure that you have a mesh and a blend of both, so that you're capturing the full risk view of your value chain in one place and then directly engaging where it makes sense. And this is really how Assent's process is designed. It's really going to be a collaboration between our customers and their supply chain, with Assent as the tool and the bridge between those. So we're really focused on making sure that you have insights into your supply chain and that you have the ability to develop those relationships to get you the most holistic information you possibly can. So we obviously have a supplier portal that's free to use. It's has a lot of education and tools in there to make sure that the suppliers have as low a barrier to entry as possible. We have a global support team that is available 24/7, speaks 14 plus different languages, located in time zones. So if any of these suppliers or value chain entities have any questions, concerns, or comments, they can pick up the phone and speak to a human being in real time, or chat or email in their native language, to make sure that the education and the corrective actions they're reading are all in one place. And ultimately, we're giving you that data back so that you can report on it and understand the intelligence and insights into your supply chain. I'm not going to go into each and every solution set, but I see some questions coming in around CSRD, and we'll tie into that at the end. But essentially, Assent is trying to drive, when it comes to those value chain or supply chain engagements, when it comes to our ESG solution set, kind of organizational level data collection on vital topic sets. We also have a solution suite for material compliance, where we're collecting component level information for different regulations like PFAS, REACH, RoHS, SCIP. But the idea there is you need to meet the suppliers where they are. And I think our ESG solution set is really critical in this, where we start off with a bundle of question sets, but not all of these topics are material to each of our customers. So based off your materiality assessments or your internal risk scoring, we would turn on the reports that are only viable for you and your value chain entities. So take climate impact as an example. I think this will be relevant for everyone. We want to make sure that we use build level questionnaires to meet the value chain entities and supply chain entities where they are today. So instead of overwhelming them with a 20-page survey with lots of complex topics, we're going to simply give them a way to interact in the portal, to answer questions, and based off those responses, we'll collect more and more data from them. So the example here would say, does your organization have a greenhouse gas reporting policy? If they say yes, the follow-up question is, are you reporting on scope 1, scope 2, or scope 3? Based off their response to that question, they'll get follow-up questions on those levels of scopes that meet their maturity. There's no point in asking for LCA data if a company doesn't even have a greenhouse gas policy. That's a disconnect. And we want to be able to meet them where they are so that we can provide corrective actions to improve that over time and flag those risks into our customer base. Assent is going to collect and manage this data on your behalf and store it in our centralized Assent Sustainability Manager that your teams have access to. That's going to give you performance of suppliers across a various ESG or material compliance areas. It's going to track that supplier engagement in real time to let you know exactly where your programs sit, who's non-responding, what feedback they're providing, and then which ESG or material topics could be a source of risk in your supply chain based off both that direct and indirect engagement. And then ultimately, as an export, I know a lot of people always ask us, well, what can we use other than getting these lovely dashboards? How does this information look? Well, ultimately, all of our customers need to either report to their customers or to regulatory bodies. So if we follow the GRI standard as an example, we'll actually collect and collate that data and provide inserts that you can use in your sustainability reports. So using the, again, climate impact piece, it can measure exactly how much Scope 3 emissions were allocated to your organization. It can track that year over year, show continual improvement or areas for improvement, and it can show how that information has come into the system. So at a very, very high level, Assent wants to be your partner to engage your value chain and your individual entities, and try to make sure that we understand your business, your risks, and meet you where you are so that you can meet your value chain where they are. So I've provided some contact information. I'd be more than happy to speak with anyone offline. We've provided some free tools and assessments as well that link to our website, that maturity assessment. We do also have a risk assessment, which will help you prioritize some topic areas, whether that's PFAS, CSRD, based off your region. So feel free to go to our website. There's a lot of webinars, content, and free resources that are very valuable there. Or just reach out and we're happy to answer any questions, which we know we have some in the chat. So I will pause briefly and turn over to that and thank everyone for now.
So thank you, Stephen and Emma. I saw that you answer again directly, basically in the chat. We have too many questions to answer live, honestly speaking, but I want to answer at last a couple of that. First one, how is Assent looking to support companies with the new corporate sustainability reporting directly requirements?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, it's a great question, Valentina, and I think it ties in at our core to what we are as a business. So we want to make sure that organizations are always aware of their requirements moving forward, like we mentioned, and have a process to do that. Now, Assent isn't going to be able to do everything. So where we sit is being a value chain partner. So the new CSRD has wide scope of reporting requirements, and you're going to need to do a lot of internal reflection, things that are happening inside your four walls based off your policies, your production, how you're treating your own labor force as examples. But just as important, you also need to engage your value chain and report on what they're doing and they're undertaking and how that's affecting your business. So if you think of kind of your value chain as everything that happens outside your four walls, that's where Assent is looking to support. And what's really interesting with CSRD is the requirement itself actually mandates one of the steps that we mentioned, which is undertaking a double materiality assessment, which means highlighting what risks are material to your business. So what are potential impacts, risk areas, or opportunities? So you need to make that assessment and then go out and collect and report based off that assessment. So Assent can help you conduct the materiality assessment with your value chain lens on, and then collect and manage all the information required to report back out against that materiality assessment. But great question.
Okay, the other one is, can PFAS material be recycled?
Yeah, so I mean, the aim of regulators and legislators all across the world is really to remove PFAS from products and subsequently from the environment. I mean, recycling of PFAS materials would therefore not be desirable. But I mean, at the moment, PFAS is in a wide range of products, right? And it's therefore inevitably recycled at the moment. So once restrictions are in place, I mean, we're seeing the reporting requirements in the US, for example, but those are looking to become, once they have the data and they know where it is, then they know where to focus on restrictions. Same with the restriction proposals in the EU. Once these are in place, this is really looking to mitigate this with time. So let's try not to recycle PFAS materials.
Okay. So last one, this kind of due intelligence here is a real challenges for SME business. There are also challenges with getting supply chain info from SME suppliers. Or if you were an SME trying to get information out, the large suppliers specific to part suppliers, etc.
Yeah, so At Assent, there's two sides to this, really. The first one is that we have a, like Stephen mentioned, an indirect monitoring solution, the enhanced supplier screening, where we can actually look at the risks based on, adverse media, for example, where you don't have to engage with your suppliers or your value chain in that sense. And the second part of this is an education piece for small, medium enterprises we're talking about here. Really, it's all about education and working with them to get the data and for them to understand, the quality and the why they need to be giving you that data and making their organization sustainable as well. Great question.
Yeah. One other little piece I would add to that is also partnering with organizations like Assent can be really beneficial. We have a tool and a network that is going to engage those suppliers, especially if you're not maybe their biggest buying power person, to make sure that they're understanding that they need to provide this information back to Assent because, hey, you may be a small, medium-sized organization who isn't super commercially relevant, or they need to dive a ton of resources in to provide your response. However, by working with an industry leader like Assent, we may be asking on behalf of some of their other customers. So we may have 30 other customers asking for the same information. So that supplier would be then interested in providing that data back out. And conversely, for a small organization that's struggling with those resources, that same kind of scale effect can happen. If they need some support to provide the data, they need to understand the requirements, they can get that education from our teams, provide the information in a format that's acceptable, and then again, share that across the network to mitigate their burdens. So it's a challenge, but it's definitely one that we're very familiar with. Okay.
It's not a question, it's only Jordan that wrote, no questions, just thank you for the presentation. And with that, thank you for attending this session. Thank you, Stephen, thank you, Emma. And to all the people that following that session, please join the next session from the lobby.
Perfect. Thanks, Valentina. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much.